Good evening, everyone. And good evening, candidates. We are so glad that you are here this evening for this important conversation. And having run for office, I know that you are going to get your handful of forums, but we hope that we have a lively, stimulating conversation and that this is actually a fairly substantive debate. You've received the rules for how we will engage the questions. And so having said that, I'm going to invite each of you, beginning with our current interim mayor, Ray O'Connell, and then going to each subsequent person to the side of you to describe for us your 3 campaign priorities. What are your 3 campaign priorities?
On. Testing.
Let's try it again.
Testing. 1, 2.
Better.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Not much volume. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Welcome, everyone. I thank you for coming out tonight to show your interest in city government. I appreciate this opportunity. My 3 top campaign priorities are: number 1, public safety. Public safety of any city should be the number 1 priorities. Public safety, what we've done so far for my first year in office, our fire department is receiving 4 long overdue needed fire trucks. They'll be delivered in the next 2 weeks, as well as I put in the 2019 budget 2 more firefighters. Our police department is being brought up to closer to our full complement of 222 officers. Last night, City Council approved 8 new police officers. Our police officers are now outfitted with body cameras. This protects our citizens and our officers alike for the usage of the body cameras. In 2019, we added 1 new ambulance, and since I became mayor 1 year ago, 16% drop in crime rate. My second priority is economic development. Obviously, we all know what the NIS has done to Center City. That is not enough to complement the entire city. We need to develop all of the city, the east side, the south side, the north side of the city. Our CED department is working daily with commercial developers and housing developers. Courtney Robinson sponsored a bill involving our small business community. We now have a small business advisory board made up of 7 members. They'll be selected in the future. We continue to work with City Center, General Development, and AEDC to increase the availability of commercial and industrial space in Allentown to create jobs, job creation for our residents. My third priority is quality of life issues. I like to increase working with the Allentown School District, increase after-school and summer programs for our children. We started a systemic enforcement of blighted properties. I want all residents in Allentown to have access to health care, education, transportation, housing, air quality, and water quality. Also, we're addressing the human rights issue. In the 2019 budget, I put in to hire a human relations officer, which is long overdue. Discrimination has no place in the city of Allentown, and we are interviewing people at this point, and we'll be selecting someone very shortly. Also, I am talking to developers. My dream is to have a huge movie theater downtown. My dream is to have a big, huge ice cream parlor downtown for our families, for our children, for our grandchildren. But the bottom line is, for me, public safety, economic development, quality of life issues, strong families plus a strong neighborhoods equal a strong city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Patrick Palmer.
Hi, Patrick Palmer. I'm actually the chair of the Human Relations Commission that he was mentioning. I do agree that safety is one of the key points here that you want to focus on, but let's go a little more in depth with that. My 3 key points are job availability, not just job availability, but job availability for our Allentown residents. I can understand wanting to get more jobs, but if they're not going to our residents, then what are we doing here in Allentown? 80% of our jobs aren't going to our Allentown residents that pay $80,000 or more. We need to focus on that to make sure that our residents have the ability to not be working 3 jobs over and over and over again just to pay the bills. Also, want to mention that we need to focus on affordable housing for our residents of Allentown. There are different things that can be done to assist with affordable housing here in Allentown. If you look no further, even Milwaukee itself, just yesterday, put into place to build 32-story building with 315 affordable housing units. So that's something that can be done. That's something that's being done in other cities. That's something that's not really being focused on here. And my final point is our homeless. Once again, this all goes into safety as well, but the homeless need a place to live. The homeless need help getting back on their feet. A lot of homeless people, a lot of individuals don't realize is they're just down on their luck, or they were working those 3 jobs and they missed 1 paycheck from one of those jobs. That then creates a homeless situation. There's a lot of people in Allentown that are 1 paycheck away from being homeless, which is even more than the homeless that we have here. We need to focus on making sure that they have affordable living wage jobs. We need to make sure that they have affordable housing to live in. And then we need to make sure that we are taking care of the homeless situation through different rehabilitation and revitalization programs, including homeless shelters, to make sure they have a place to go to be rehabilitated. And that all does go back into safety. I want to have more transparency with the police. When it comes into safety, it's not just a police situation, it's a community situation. I want to be able to bring the community together so we can believe in and trust in our officers. And that, as being part of your human relations chair, ties in with the diversity and the understanding of trauma that takes place in an individual when you do have some kind of interaction with the police. These are what I will lead on, and these are what we will do to change Allentown.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Watts, please.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Johnson-Watts, and thank you for having me here this evening. The 3 top priorities for me fall under one overarching goal: to position Allentown to be a leading city in our global economy. The 3 key areas of concern for me are our budget. Right now, we went to what I consider a last resort of a 27% increase. There are a number of reasons across the board as to why that occurred. My focus will be on generating revenue in other ways, not through taxes, not through fines, not through penalties, but through enterprise and permits. Permits are fees that you pay, but they represent opportunity. They represent the creation of something about to happen. In addition to that, quality of life. We talk about affordable housing. Let's keep in mind, there are some cases of housing that is affordable, but not quite well maintained. So we have to look at everything. In addition to that, when we talk about blight, we want to be careful that we're not now pushing people into homelessness as we have zealousness for the blight situation. We're seeing examples of that in other parts of the country. And then third, but not least, communication. For the first time today, I learned about a Live Near Where You Work program that is made available to employees of companies within Allentown. I just so happened to find it because I was getting to know the site to the depth of what changes might need to be made. These are the types of programs that need to be promoted to everyone, because perhaps you might not currently work at a company in Allentown, but you might consider applying to work at some of the companies in Allentown if you know that you could possibly afford a home if you work for them. So these are the 3 key things. Ultimately, positioning Allentown to be a leading city in our global economy with the focus on budget and how to generate revenue. Secondly, the quality of life, not pushing people into homelessness and taking care of them. And ultimately, communication. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ramos.
Hello, everyone. My name's Tim Ramos. You can hear me? There we go. My big focus is our budget issue. For easily the last 20 years, we've had an issue in Allentown. High taxes is not something new. Many of you who are connected with me or connected with ACE read the article the other day from 1998 talking about high taxes in the city of Allentown. So obviously this is nothing new. And while everyone runs around, and I mean everyone in our community, they say, man, well, you know, we didn't raise taxes for 13 years, but they raised taxes by other ways. They raised taxes by the EIT tax, which was raised 2 times or 3 times. It was raised illegally because our city charter says that it's not supposed to go above 1%. It was raised much above that, and we need to hold our city accountable when we have something in our city charter, which is our city's constitution, and they're not willing to follow it. Well, they're already creating an environment where it's okay to violate the charter, it's okay to violate the law, and we can't continue with that. We have a high tax issue that's forcing our communities into poverty, where everyone in the center city area, everyone across the city who are struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, now we have to pay 27% taxes higher than what we were already struggling to pay last year. Aside of that, we have service fees, which have been increased over the years. We have a stormwater runoff tax, which is now being put on us. And again, I raised these issues a couple months back in the county commissioners meeting, and I argued that what are we supposed to do for our elderly citizens or people on fixed income? And within seconds, I sit down, a gentleman gets up, and he says, I want to thank Tim Ramos because I'm one of those individuals, and now after 40 years of owning my home, I might have to sell my home because I'm a loser. I can't afford the taxes that are coming. Second is community policing that I would like to reinstitute. I grew up where we knew the police from our community. I remember Officer John from Washington Elementary. I remember Officer Cruz. Actually, Officer Cruz even knew my parents. He went to church with us, and if he ever called any of me or my siblings out of line, he would say, I'm calling your mother. And of course, we ran home and we got dealt with. It builds the community. It builds stronger relationships with our community. And most people are less willing to disrespect or violate someone they've grown up respecting. Aside of that, I believe that our community needs a stronger voice in this city, so I would like to implement a true ward system, dividing the city into 7 districts, which would require our city council members to live amongst roughly 18,000 members of our community in that district, and I believe that gives us a stronger voice in the position of leadership, and we would easily change the face of Allentown doing that. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Will you give our candidates a round of applause, please? Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for your introductory remarks. Our first question comes from a student from the William Allen High School, and he is a member of the group Empower. He's going to direct this question to Mr. O'Connell, and each of you will get 45 seconds after Mr. O'Connell's response to rebut.
How will you address the city's dire financial situation?
I didn't hear that. Cities?
How will you address the city's dire financial situation?
Well, I addressed it a little bit. It's not very popular in 2019 budget, but the city went for 13 years without a tax increase. And that being stated, we were robbing Peter to pay Paul. We had so much money in the cash reserves, and over the course of the years, there was no tax increase, no tax increase, tax increase. And I fully understand that, and it made obviously all the homeowners, property owners happy and content. But we started the year, the summer of last year, with an 8.9 structural deficit. We trimmed that down at various budget meetings to 6.2. We were still 6.2 in the deficit in the red. So I met with, we did a budget that I thought had to raise taxes. Taxes weren't raised in 13 years under one administration, and under another administration it wasn't raised in 10 years. So I raised taxes 1.5 mils, which brought in $7.6 million. That puts us in the cash reserve starting the year at $1.4 million. At the end of 2018, the general fund revenues exceeded expenditures by another $2.5 million. The business privilege tax collection has increased significantly. I don't know if you're following, but we are going after the business privilege tax for nonprofits. We also have bank reconciliations that are timelier. We know exactly how much money we have in our deposit box, and we're working with our vendors very closely to make sure that we get the best bang for a buck when we put out an RFP. So as it was an unpopular decision, it was a decision that had to be made for the fiscal responsibility of the city that I felt was not addressed over the previous years. So again, the 30 seconds. So again, our books are in order. We have started an EIP program. It's called Early Intervention Program, working with City Council and my administration. We're going to look at increasing revenues, and we're going to look at decreasing expenditures. And we're doing that every month, sitting down with all the budgetary departments. Thank you.
Thank you. What say the rest of you to Mr. O'Connell's response? He was sitting on City Council as a member when our city spiraled into economic despair. Are there any rebuttals?
Okay. Just a couple answers for that, because that one kind of hits me right here when you mentioned the tax increase of 27%. I know a few individuals who go through situations with tax increases like that, who, without going deep into it, have to do things just to make enough ends meet to be able to pay for what they have now. When you increase their taxes by 27%, now it turns into a situation where they have nowhere to live. So we need to look into different things that we can do in order to make sure to increase revenue. One of those is a better understanding and a better and proper way to deal with the blight situation that we have. Those blighted buildings end up being owned by the city themselves. They need to be put back on the tax roll, rehabilitated, and we need to deal with these absentee landlords I guess I'm up. We need to do things to deal with the absentee landlords, which puts the buildings back on the payroll, which then allows us to go ahead and tax those buildings, which increases revenue that we do receive. If we have other places coming in, they're buying up other properties as well. We need to get individuals moving back into the city as a way to increase our revenue that we can gain. We can do other things as well to go into that to make sure that we don't
Palmer,
have a
we're going to have to leave it there. Sorry.
So I encourage everyone to look at our backgrounds. I worked in financial services for a number of years, and I'm uniquely qualified to evaluate some of the circumstances that we're under. I am very familiar with the concerns of public pension investment as well as municipal finance. There are scenarios where we are in contracts that we are under obligation to that we may perhaps have to renegotiate. But until I'm sitting in the seat of mayor, I won't know what those contracts necessarily say or how they came about. So I would do an independent financial audit by a company that has never worked with the city before. And in addition to that, I would begin to evaluate solutions, which I am accustomed to dealing with on a basis of granular level.
Thank you. Mr. Ramos, anything?
I would address the finances by doing a zero-based budget. I believe that we need to treat it like a business, but not conduct ourselves like a CEO. Do a zero-based budget and force every department to prove the necessity for the funds being spent in their departments. Aside of that, the deficit that we're facing is going to be even larger because there was rollover of last year debts that weren't paid that was rolled over into this year's general fund, and that's what they're going to use to pay it. And this is the kind of thing that we need to be addressing. But I would energize small business by removing red tape and not overburden our small businesses by extreme prices in permits and fees, and forcing companies or small businesses to get an architect to show the rendering of something that you're not even going to change. Those are things that we're doing, and if we did that and eliminated that red tape, we'd energize small business, which would immediately bring more dollars into City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Our second question is directed to Mr. Palmer, and this question, it should be noted, was the most voted for question on our Facebook poll. Allentown has the highest poverty rate of any municipality in the region. Meanwhile, we have very high rents that keep rising meteorically. What is your specific strategy or policy for affordable housing in the Queen City? Mr. Palmer.
Thank you for that. Well, one of the problems that we have here in Allentown is we don't have the infrastructure to stop these rates from rising. We don't have any cap on how much rent can go up in a single year. We don't have any cap on where the rent can go to, and we don't have any cap on who's allowed to rent. So right now, I'll give you an example of Center City, Allentown. There's about 2/3 of the residents that live in Center City, Allentown. Most of those homes, over 60% of those homes, are actually rentals. We need to do something about the fact that everyone's coming in, renting these places out, and then unfortunately it's gentrification 101 that takes place. So I want to make sure that we have some kind of cap when it comes to who can come in and how many properties can be rented out in, let's say, a single year. How much can the rent go up in a single year? We need to focus on making sure that our residents have somewhere to actually live by adding inclusionary zoning. So when someone does build a place, that we can make sure that 20% of what they are building, when it comes to a big apartment building or a complex, 20% of those are going to individuals who are on some kind of fixed income, because those individuals need a place to live just as much as those other individuals that are getting those places. We need to make sure that we do have jobs here that are paying individuals a living wage. Part of the problem is people are willing to work. They're working 3 jobs, so you are willing to work. You just don't have a place that's willing to pay you a living wage so you can work. That then ties into, it keeps going down, it keeps causing something to go on in the family where now the child has to then start working. That child is now working minimum wage. That child is now missing school, falling asleep in school. Situations like that are taking place. So this is a trickle-down effect. So now that child himself can go to school while that parent is just working 1 job. We're making sure that we do have jobs in Allentown. They're staying in Allentown. Our residents are living in Allentown, and they're living comfortably in Allentown. That, in effect, we'll go ahead and make sure that once we have those buildings that do have caps on how much they are raising their rent, we will go ahead and make sure that they can't just come in, they can't just move in, charge us $2,100 for a single bedroom apartment. Make sure that we do have a place. So when we look across at something like what's going on Hamilton Street, we
Mr.
can
Palmer,
say,
we're going to have to cut it there. I'm sorry to keep doing that.
So I'm hearing you say, Mr. Palmer, rent control and inclusionary zoning to a certain degree.
To a certain degree.
And I would like the rest of the candidates, if you have something to say, if you want to rebut that or add to that in terms of what you would do to deal with the raising cost of rent despite our highly impoverished city.
I'd like to take a proactive approach. As a city, I would like to start inviting people to actually build and rebuild, who have an interest in seeing a place that has a quality of life where people can not only be employed, but also live in a place that is well maintained. There are many people who come to Allentown to buy properties, but we have a say in who actually learns about Allentown and who ends up coming. I would go out and find the people, and I would have the community come together so we can identify the key points that we want to engage, so that we can begin to find prospective owners of properties who will create the Allentown we're looking forward to seeing.
Thank you. Mr. Ramos or Mr. O'Connell?
Well, one, I want to start by saying that there are still areas of Allentown where it is affordable, but what we need to be doing is educating our community and encouraging them not to rent anymore, but to buy. Many of the people in our community come from places like New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, where they're high rent areas. We need to encourage them to purchase their homes, and that would also help. Aside of that, we have people like Nat Hyman, who is building hundreds of units, and his units start at about $600 a month. So there are some people, and he's not in the NIS, so there are some people who are trying to address that. Aside of that, rent control was touted in Berlin just a year ago. It was social groups were celebrating it for a year, how great it was, and today they're fighting that the government eminent domain properties from renters. Is that what we want to see in the city of Allentown a year from now?
Thank you. Mr. Gunner.
Okay. 2 years ago, I ran for mayor, 2017, and I had very strong campaign workers, and I have no problem talking about inclusionary zoning, affordable housing, workforce housing, none at all. But when we talk about affordable housing, we're generalizing. I want quality affordable housing. We are speaking on a daily basis with housing developers who are interested in projects in Allentown. Our redevelopment authority is under agreement with the developer to construct affordable housing on Front Street using the low-income housing credits. offered by PHFA at the old Ribbon Works in Allentown. We also, with this budget this year, myself and City Council put $300,000 in the budget fund for Allentown Housing Trust Fund. I have no problem talking about any developer about inclusionary zoning, affordable housing, workforce housing, none at all. It's a direction we need to go, as long as the affordable housing is
Mr.
quality
O'Connell, we're gonna have to cut
affordable
it there.
housing.
Thank you. Thank you. Our third question for this evening is around police aggression. And it's going to be asked by a member of Make the Road, and it's going to be directed to Mr. Ramos, followed by rebuttal from the other three candidates.
All right. So Joey Santos was an unarmed man who was killed by a South Whitehall police officer in broad daylight last summer. In the light of what happened to Joey, what are you prepared to do about police aggression, particularly when it comes against black and brown residents? Now, this is a multiple choice question. So option A is implicate bias training. Don't do, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos.
In my opinion, we need to change the culture of policing in our community. You know, guys, we can answer a lot of this by hiring local and recruiting local. I remember I myself applied to the Allentown Police when we did a mass hiring. 3,200 people applied, and I didn't get hired after being interviewed and passing a lot of the exams and you know, the prerequisite things you got to go through. So those are things I believe immediately we can change the attitude of our police. And again, going to a community policing formula that I grew up with. And I fought for this for the past 8 years in City Council. And now, just in the last 3 weeks, they're saying, hey, maybe we'll do community policing. Well, I've been arguing for this for 8 years. Why I don't understand why we got away from it. It changes the environment. It changes the relationship between our police and the community. And I'm gonna just end with this. We have problems in the city of Allentown, and we are facing many different things, and we have certain issues where in relationship to our police and our community. But I think I can confidently say, and I think everyone here, that the Allentown Police they're a little more or better prepared to deal with a situation like that. And I just have to say I don't envision our police doing what happened to Mr. Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Rebuttal from other candidates.
I'll start. Number one, it's all about training, professional development. We have a very aggressive police chief who putting his officers through training on a weekly, monthly basis. It's also learning how to de-escalate a situation, not to increase it, but to de-escalate it. There are many people out there who, in the last several months, they have dared our police officers deaths by suicide. They wanted our officers to basically kill them. We have shown great restraint. It's all about de-escalation. Number one, neighborhood community policing will be reinstituted in 2020, okay? Also, we also need to begin, if we have people who are mentally ill, rather than put them into the criminal justice system, we need to get them and treat them for mental health issues. Thank you.
In terms of community policing and policing in general, I would like to see more incentivizing and recognition for officers who do a great job. We have some who stand out and excel. We have others that we're not aware of. And I believe that if we begin to demonstrate that there is value in your community participation, there is a reward, not financial, but recognition driven, for the way you interact with the public. So that's one thing. And in addition to that, I would begin to monitor through the support of a nonprofit organization the cases of harassment that happen across the city, because from my conversations, they tend to happen only in certain areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer.
Three things. One, I agree with the community policing, and I do agree that we need more police out, walking beats, meeting our people, greeting our people, learning people's names, learning the areas. Another one is I had actual talk with this, with a few individuals about this. I know we need better community engagement with the police, and not just from our side, from the police side. They need to come out to our events, they need to come to events like this, and they need to be seen, they need to be talking to individuals. They need to learn what we have to say about them, and they need to do things to help quell any fears that we do have. The last but not least, if you look no further than Chicago, they actually put together a group in Chicago that was done by the mayor that was full of black and brown individuals that actually sit there and they monitor things that the police do. It's an accountability commission that monitors what the police do, the police report to them, the police speak to them, and we can do things like that here full of black and brown individuals.
Thank you. Show of hands, how many of you believe that we need to have implicit bias training for all of our officers, not you in the audience. I appreciate the candidates. How many of you believe that our officers should be trained in implicit biasness? Okay. How many of you believe that our officers ought to have residency requirements?
I think we're going that direction.
Okay, very, very good. All right. And how many of you believe that our officers should be held accountable for any violence that they commit?
Yes.
I just want to be clear. Thank you so much.
Mr. Edwards, if I could.
I have to move on. Thank you. I appreciate that. Number 4, our question number 4 is longer, and it's aimed at Cheryl Johnson-Watts, and please listen carefully. It is a longer question. The rest of you will get a chance to rebut. You may disagree or agree, or add some addendums. Last year, the NIS Fund diverted $2.6 million of local property taxes to pay down debt on the PPL Center and private developments like 2 City Center and Tower 6. The year before, it was $2.9 million in diverted taxes. Additionally, major downtown footprints like the PPL Center pay no property taxes, which could be worth $3 million to the school district, city, and county. The booming downtown puts additional stress on infrastructure like roads, sewer, and waste. Allentown residents are subsidizing private developers to build corporate high-rises and luxury restaurants. Despite this, poverty in the adjacent areas remains stubbornly high and has increased in some surrounding neighborhoods. How will you, through policy, ensure that this massive subsidy starts to benefit all of the city of Allentown's residents and not just the wealthy few? Ms. Johnson-Watts. Mike, please.
First and foremost, from the mayor's seat, that might be the only place that I would be able to find out the actuals, which goes back to the independent financial audit by a company that has never worked for the city. I am not sure what those numbers are, but I do understand the pass-through and the concept that you're referring to and how money flows in different directions. The measure of that amount I don't know with clarity, and I will never know, even sitting on the school board. I will say this much. After the completion of an independent financial audit by a company that has never done work with the city, I would also take a look at what is next for this city, and then begin to see other ways that we can begin to build and create opportunity zones that might not be under the regulations and the restrictions of the NIS. In other words, there are opportunity zone possibilities granted by the state of Pennsylvania. I do believe it is in everyone's best interest to look out for the future of our city so that it is done in a comprehensive, collaborative, and inclusive and communicative way. So therefore, that would be my next step after getting clarity on the ins and outs of the NIS through an independent financial audit by a company that has never done business with the city. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Ramos, Mr. Palmer, Mr. O'Connell.
One is I fought against parts of the NIS, like the arena and the eminent domaining of private property running down Hamilton Street. We eliminated a large tax base with buildings to put one building that doesn't pay any taxes, and that we're seeing and we're witnessing the results of that. It was irresponsible, and the original plan for the arena was to be down on the waterfront, where they could have did it without any problem. But aside of that is many of these boards, not just in NISDA, there's many boards in our city government that make decisions over our lives financially. They spend our dollars and they control what we can do even on our own property. I think we need to put those positions to now be elected positions. There are cities all across the state of Pennsylvania that do the same thing, where all boards are elected as well.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell, Mr. Palmer?
I'll try not to take too long, but just to clarify a few things. I've seen some of these contracts. There's a sunshine law which makes it so you can see all contracts that take place and any agreements that the city does, which also makes it so all meetings are actually posted on the city's website if anyone wants to look into those. So I've seen some of what's gone on. I've read a lot of what's going on, and I've read how the NIS isn't really made to generate money for the city. So what we need to do is we need to start focusing on what's going on around the NIS. We need to start focusing on what's going on for the small businesses around the NIS. We need to see where people are stopping, how the small businesses are doing, the more they're making, and we need to focus on making sure that the places around the NIS are brought up and made sure that they are making money as well.
Thank you. Mr. O'Connell.
Very quickly, look, the NIS was a boom for Center City. There's no doubt about it. Last year, 2.66 million people came into Allentown. I lived in the days when Allentown and Center City was dead. So we have, it's not a silver bullet, but it's a start. What I would like to do with developers is, and I said this 2 years ago, we need community benefits agreements, we need development impact statements from developers, and we need to utilize throughout the city of Allentown our 5 opportunity zones that we have. But the NIS has started revitalization in this city, but it can't just stay in Center City. It has to go throughout the entire city. But the NIS has truly helped Allentown come back.
If I may, what would you include in a community benefits agreement, Mr. O'Connell?
I would say that any developer who's doing something in any community would sit down with the neighborhood people that it would directly affect. We would look at revitalizing that, not whatever the building it is. We would look at kind of like let's take like a school-based revitalization program. You build a school, you revitalize the neighborhood around the school with the stakeholders who live in that neighborhood, which is being done at 12th and Gordon right now.
Okay, very good.
Can
Thank
we
you.
respond to any of that?
I think have you responded? I think you've responded. Yeah, we have, unfortunately, we have got so many questions that we want to make sure all of our candidates get an opportunity to answer. So this, actually, you can stay with the mic, Mr. Mamos, this question is for you. What are your creative and innovative ideas to have a city workforce that is diverse and representative of the city's current demographics? By all recent indicators, we have a city that is majority black and brown, but its political, economic, and educational, moreover, representation does not necessarily equate to that. So what would you do?
Again, I believe we need to hire local and recruit local. I think that many times what we face in communities like ours is arbitrary qualifications are set up, because you can have someone who has the best degree in the world, but they don't have life experience and they don't know how to apply that degree in many situations. I've dealt with that as manager of, when I was manager of an inventory, over inventory in ASCO manufacturing, and when I was dealing with certain things, selling conveyor belt systems, we would have people come in and they just didn't, they were very educated, they just didn't understand the systems, so they need to be trained. On the flip side, you have people who have great experience but no education, so we create these qualifiers and then we eliminate a large portion of our community, not recognizing or respecting the fact that, you know what, a lot of the people in this community have the right ideas, because guess what, they're from this community, they know the history of our community, they know what affects us adversely, and that's an immediate way we can have a complete difference. Again, in issues of dealing with zoning or housing, I got to highlight, I see Mr. Ken Heffentrager in the room. Him and the Allentown Tenant Association have an idea to give like a benefits-based system to highlight good landlords. We can do things like that, bringing in guys like that to give us information that maybe we don't have down in City Hall. So we hire local, we recruit local, and we accept the community that we have.
Thank you. Other responses or rebuttal to what Mr. Ramos said?
Yeah, okay. I totally agree that the city employees need to reflect the community racially, ethnically, and gender-wise. And I have made a commitment of my administration to hire qualified people. I'm very proud that my CED director, African-American, my HR director, African-American, my Karen Elchar, Friends of the Park, new director of Parks and Recreation. One that I'm very proud of is I hired the first ever Latino deputy fire chief in the history of the city of Allentown. I want to hire qualified people. I'm looking at gender, racial makeup, in the entirety. Our workforce needs to reflect the community, and that's very difficult to do at times, but I'm working hard to do that every day.
Thank you.
As a chair of the Human Relations, I deal with this all the time. So some of the things that we do definitely need to do is we need to have our legislation in general reflective of our community. And I don't just mean the people that are here right now. I mean people that are in the seats doing the hiring need to be reflective of our community. We need to make sure that we are actually doing a fair hiring process, but also going to them, going out to the community. A lot of people don't know what jobs we're offering unless we do something that we can touch them and make them realize that we are. We have, for instance, no social media presence. We don't have a social media worker. We don't have anyone who handles those kinds of situations where people look for jobs on social media. People are looking for jobs there. We're not going out and having job fairs and, sorry.
Very good. Ms. Johnson-Watts?
I would collaborate with CareerLink, but in addition to that, I would post the link to the website for the city and make sure that everyone who lives in the city has taken the opportunity to fill out an application, whether there is a job available or not. Years ago, when I first moved out here, I tried to apply to the city, and for some reason, there kept being a technical problem. So I actually called the IT department to find out why there was this problem. It was never solved after about 3 weeks of calls. I chose not to bother anymore. I don't know how many other people may have experienced that back then, but as mayor, I would make sure that we knew the talent base within our very city limits.
Very good. Thank you. We are on the home stretch of our questions, candidates, so we've got a few more questions before you give closing remarks. 1/3 of Center City residents feel completely excluded from the downtown development that we previously discussed. Furthermore, large swaths of the east and south side feel totally ignored by elected officials, politicians who focus on the wealthier downtown and the West End constituencies. How will you, if elected, engage all sections of the city in a meaningful and inclusive way? And that's directed to anyone.
I would like to jump on that and say again, I would like to have a true ward system because again, we immediately have a voice in our positions of leadership. When our people are being elected from within our communities, we won't have any Center City residents, South Side resident, or East Side being ignored because the elected officials will be elected from our communities, and that will be a requirement. We immediately change the face of Allentown, and our communities lead the way into the future of this city.
So you would go to a ward system?
A ward system, absolutely.
Very good. Other candidates?
Oh man, this is another one. This is hitting me at home. As a Center City resident myself, I felt the neglect. I felt ignored. I felt like no one comes around unless it's election time. And if many of you who know me know I'm all over, whether it be to assist a homeless gentleman, whether it be to assist children, all over. And we need to make sure that the people that we do elect are doing the same things as well. You're not just elected to sit in the seat and just sit there and that's it. You're elected to make sure that the city sees you. You're elected to make sure you're leading the city. You're made sure to representative of the city. So you need to be in those wards. You need to be to the east side. You need to be to the west side. You need to be to the south side. You need to be in center city to make sure everyone is represented. How can you hear the voice of the people you're representing if you're not in center city? How can you hear the voice of the people you're representing if you're not over on the east side? We need to make sure they are there and they are seen.
So, Mr. Palmer, would you agree with Mr. Ramos that we need to move city council to a ward-based system?
I don't agree that it necessarily needs to be a ward-based system because some wards themselves don't really get the representation that they would like, while other wards just don't care. And so, for instance, if there's a ward that just doesn't care, the representative from that ward may not care either. So I don't necessarily agree that it could be a ward-based system like that if someone's just sending out someone because they have to send someone out.
Oh, okay, all right, very good.
Ready?
Mr. O'Connell.
Yeah, I talked earlier about development on the east side and south side. I would go and I would support a system where one representative would be from the east, the west, the south, and the north, and I would go for 3 at large, kind of like what the county system does. 4 selected by territory and 3 at large throughout the whole city.
I live in what's considered the edge of the West End, and I volunteer in a number of capacities. I serve on the school board. I was elected and sworn in 2017. Through that process, I spent time throughout different parts of the city. I volunteer with Make the Road, which is focusing in on Center City, and I also volunteer with the Allentown NAACP. We did a community forum last year on hip hop after an incident outside the PPL Center, which brought together about 100 people to talk about the realities of love and expression for hip hop and how some things are not necessarily connected. And I don't believe that there's any ward where anyone doesn't care. I believe the first step is to generate and cultivate civic engagement by giving people an opportunity to learn how the government that we live in works.
Very good, thank you. Closing statements. You'll have 2 minutes each to address, if you will, to the audience, any perceived misconceptions about you and or your campaign. Let's begin with Mr. O'Connell.
Closing statement. Why me? Is that what you're saying? From here. Hi. My closing remarks is, Allentown is a wonderful city that I've been privileged to call home my entire adult life. 38 years working for the Allentown School District, 8 years on City Council, the last 3 years as president of City Council, being appointed as the interim mayor. I'm in the 13th month. I have 9 months to go. I want to run, and I'm running, obviously, for the remaining 2 years of the term. I'm running to continue the work of rebuilding our city and the trust of our citizens so that Allentown will be a vibrant city once again on the rise. Why should you vote for me on May 21st? A vote for me is really a vote for yourself. Why do I say that? We have the same hope for Allentown. We all love Allentown. We all bleed Allentown. A city where we are proud to raise our families, to make a better life for our children and our grandchildren. We need to do it together. As I said many times, being the mayor is not a one-man show or a one-person show. You need to have everybody involved, from your directors to community engagement to civic engagement. Therefore, I would be honored and humbled if you would elect me for the remaining 2 years of this term. Thank you, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. So I'm believing that there's no perceived misconceptions about your campaign or you on the basis of your response. Okay, very good. Thank you. I just want to make sure you answer the question. That's good. Okay, very good. All right, very good. Mr. Palmer.
Okay. I don't know about any misconceptions or ill-perceived notions about me or my campaign, but some of the things that I can say is I was raised here. I understand Allentown. I understand what Allentown needs. I'm a Center City resident. I'm a Center City kid. I've grown up I went from the east side, south side, Center City. I've been all over. I interact with all over. I'm there all over. I realize what these people need. I realize what our citizens need. I realize the hope that we have in the individual leading. And I realize that our leadership needs to be representative of the city. This city is 72% when it comes to our demographic of a mixed race or, as we say, minorities for this city. This city needs representation at the top level, and this city's not getting that. This city needs someone who understands what it's like to have nothing and be able to still go home and try to find something to eat at night. This city needs a representative who knows what it's like to have heartache, to wonder what you're going to eat at night. This city I was born from immigrants who moved to Allentown. So I understand what it's like for people to move in here, have to make a living, have to do what's right to make sure you live. So when you're voting for me, you're voting for someone who's been through this, someone who cares, someone who will rebuild Allentown to the way it should be, to make sure our citizens here have a place to live, to make sure our citizens here have something to eat, to make sure our citizens here don't have to worry about where their next paycheck is coming from. Our citizens here right now are struggling. Our citizens here are in dire straits when you have a room that costs $1,300, but you're only bringing home $1,300 a month. What are we going to do here as citizens? Our city here, we have a crime situation, violent crime situation. Our violent crime rate is 47% higher than the average in Pennsylvania. It's 16% higher than the national average. We need to do something about that. We need to do something about our communication and our trauma that's taking place in our city and fix that to make sure that our children, when they're growing up, they have a happy and healthy way of living.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Ms. Johnson-Watts.
I'm not aware of any misconceptions, but I will invite anyone that wants to know more about me to always ask me. You can stop me on the street. You can stop me in this evening. I will be glad to speak with you. And I also speak Spanish, so there's no barrier there. I just want to say that when it comes to the city of Allentown, I chose to live in Allentown because I saw a combination of diversity and urban essence, but at the same time, you could get just about anywhere in 15 minutes. You can be in any environment in 15 minutes if you drive.
Unless you're on 22.
Unless you're on 22. Now, the other thing too is Lanta. I have ridden on Lanta quite a bit, so there is some things that could be done in terms of the county, in terms of Lanta, and making things not have to all pass through the terminal center. But I spend some time from time to time in the terminal center talking to people and hearing what's on their mind. And what I want to say to you, if you vote for me, you've got an interesting combination. Someone who understands the potential for Allentown, has a vision for Allentown to be a leading city in our global economy, which will bring together the asset of our diversity, in addition to the ability to relate to other cultures. And I also say to you that I understand you as different as you think you are from me. I understand you much better than you realize.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Watts. Mr. Ramos, closing remarks.
I'd like to start by saying I was raised down on 7th Street. I lived there for 30 years of my life. To say I'm a Center City kid is an understatement. All my life I've been right here. I went to Washington Elementary, Trexler Middle School, and I'm a William Allen graduate. It was at Trexler Middle School I first met Ray O'Connell. In those days, he was my principal, and I was causing him grief. And here I am 24 years later. Not much has changed, except I'm chasing him down for the position of mayor.
Causing him grief.
So, but you know, what we need to understand is we need to restore the greatness of Allentown. I said many years ago that the city of Allentown needs to be a beacon of light in a dark place. We're the heart of the Lehigh Valley. And look, guys, we're 2 hours from New York. We're 45 minutes from Philadelphia. This is a business hub, and it hasn't been conducted as such. I believe that the city of Allentown needs someone that looks like them, comes from their community, understands what it's like and what the heart of Allentown is, because I come from the heart of Allentown. We need like Patrick said, we're 72% non-white in our city, but we can't ignore our Caucasian brothers and sisters. But we do need to recognize 54% of the city is Latino, with a majority of that being from Puerto Rican descent. So, para mi gente latino, nosotros tenemos que pararnos juntos. Vamos a cambiar la conversación en la ciudad de Allentown. Vamos a cambiar la cara de Allentown y vamos a hacer historia en este momento. We need to make history in this moment because history isn't going away from something. We're going to something. And what I mean by that is we're going to restore the city of Allentown. And that's why I believe that you should vote for me. And if you believe that the greatness of Allentown can be returned with the community that we have, and not for one that's coming for high-priced restaurants and luxury apartments, but what we have here with us, then I look forward to being your mayor in the coming year and doing great work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Audience, will you give these candidates a hand for their endurance over the last hour? Mr. O'Connell, Mr. Patrick Palmer, Ms. Cheryl Johnson-Watson, Mr. Tim Ramos, thank you for being with us. We'll take a short break for 5 minutes and we'll set up for our city council candidates who will undergo the same process and debate.